I never imagined that the last dinner with my daughter would be the one that shattered everything. I was driving through the familiar streets of Seattle, the soft hum of the tires on wet asphalt filling the car. The rain was steady, a constant drizzle that blurred the outlines of the buildings on either side. The city was calm, wrapped in the quiet energy that only a Seattle evening could offer. I hadn't seen Emma in weeks. We'd been busy, too busy, and it seemed like this dinner was the only chance to reconnect. I'd been so focused on Hansen Tech and all the endless meetings, the pressure from shareholders, the decisions I had to make every day, that I hadn't stopped to think about what was happening at home. Tonight was supposed to be different. I turned the volume up slightly, letting the smooth jazz wash over me. It was the music Emma used to love when she was younger. Maybe, I thought, tonight we could talk about the company, the future of Hansen Tech. I was still planning to offer her the CEO position, to hand over the reins in a year or two. It seemed like the right time. She was ready. But not tonight, I told myself. Tonight I would be her father, not the founder of a multi-million-dollar corporation. It would be a peaceful evening. At least, I hoped it would be. As I drove through the streets of the city, I couldn't help but reflect on the years I had dedicated to Hansen Tech. I had built it from the ground up, 30 years of hard work, sacrifices, and sleepless nights. All of it was for them. For Emma. I wanted to leave her something solid, something she could carry forward. It had always been the plan. But lately, I had felt the distance growing between us. She had started challenging my decisions more, questioning the direction of the company. I couldn't blame her. Times were changing, and maybe the company needed to change with it. But I hadn't expected the tension to escalate like this. Still, I wasn't worried. Emma had always been a strong, independent woman. She was ambitious, yes, but she understood the value of stability, of doing things the right way. I couldn't see her challenging me in such a drastic way. We'd have dinner tonight, and maybe we'd talk about the future of Hansen Tech. She would understand. But then my phone buzzed. I glanced down at the screen, expecting a message from the office. But it was from Michael. My stomach sank, and I felt my pulse quicken. Michael wasn't one to call without reason. "John, you need to listen to me carefully. Emma's filed a lawsuit against you." My mind froze. The words didn't register at first. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My daughter? Why? What was this about? "What do you mean? A lawsuit?" I asked, my voice shaky despite my efforts to remain calm. "She's trying to have you declared incompetent to run the company. She's accusing you of losing your ability to make sound decisions." The phone slipped from my hand. I stared ahead at the road, my vision blurring. The world around me seemed to spin. This couldn't be happening. Not after all these years. Emma was my flesh and blood. How could she do this? How could she turn on me like this? I don't understand. "This doesn't make sense, Michael," I said, my voice distant, numb. "It's serious, John. She's gathered a group of shareholders who are backing her. They're claiming that your emotional instability is putting the company at risk. She's building a case against you." I gripped the steering wheel tighter, trying to steady myself. My heart was pounding in my chest, the blood rushing to my ears. I had spent so many sleepless nights thinking about the future of the company, but this? This was something I never imagined. I'll call you back," I muttered before ending the call. My head was spinning. I didn't know what to think, what to do next. I pulled the car over to the side of the road. My thoughts were a storm. The rain had started to fall harder, splashing against the windshield, and yet the world outside seemed so distant, so unreachable. This wasn't just about business anymore. It was about my family. About Emma, the daughter I had raised and loved, who now seemed determined to destroy everything I had worked for. I sat there for a moment, the weight of the phone call sinking in. I had to go to her. I had to understand what had happened, why she was doing this. I needed to know if there was any way to fix this before it spiraled any further out of control. I pulled into the parking lot of my house, not even remembering the drive. Everything felt like a dream. It wasn't real. This couldn't be real. My hands were still shaking as I fumbled for the keys. I walked into the living room and stood by the window, staring out at the city. The rain was still falling, streaking down the glass like the thoughts swirling in my mind. The weight of what had just happened crushed me. I had built Hanson Tech for her, for our future, and now I was faced with the possibility that she was trying to destroy it all. I had always been so proud of Emma. So sure she would one day take over, lead the company to new heights. But now I wasn't so sure. I picked up the phone and called Michael again. My hands were cold. "John," he answered quickly, his voice a little sharper this time. "Tell me more," I said, my voice hoarse. "Tell me everything." He explained the situation again, this time going into more detail. Emma's case was built on accusations of my emotional instability and poor decision-making. The shareholders she had convinced were influential, and they had already begun pushing for her leadership. The lawsuit wasn't just a threat, it was a battle for control. For Hanson Tech. For everything I had worked for. I sank into the armchair by the window, my mind racing. I had no idea how long I sat there, but the rain kept falling. The sound of it against the glass was like a ticking clock, reminding me that I had to act fast. I had to go to her, talk to her, find out what was really going on. I pulled up to Emma's house, the rain still pouring heavily, and for some reason, as soon as I stood before the door, I could feel something was off. The air was thick with an uneasy tension. When the door opened, there she was, Emma. She greeted me with a smile, as always, but it was strained, too stiff to be genuine. Her eyes met mine, but there was something in them, something distant, cold. "Dad, right on time," she said, her lips curving slightly, though there was no warmth in her voice. I stepped inside, feeling an almost tangible distance between us, something unfamiliar, like a wall had been built. We exchanged pleasantries, but it was clear that something was wrong. I tried to brush it off, but the feeling of unease grew as we sat down at the dinner table. The conversation was awkward, a forced exchange about family matters, the past, and the future. Everything except the business. Emma continuously steered the topic away from anything related to Hanson Tech. I kept bringing it up, trying to find a natural opening to talk about the company, but every time I mentioned it, she skillfully changed the subject. "Are you and Trevor going on that trip to the lake soon?" she asked casually, her voice neutral, but her eyes avoided mine. I nodded, answering absent-mindedly. "Yeah, maybe next month. We haven't taken a break in a while." She nodded, but there was no real interest in her eyes. I noticed that her responses were short, dismissive. Every time I tried to speak about the company, she dodged it, and I could feel her discomfort with the topic. The silence was growing thicker between us. I could feel it, and I knew she felt it too. The more I observed her, the more I realized how controlled her movements were. The way she held herself, every gesture measured, as if she were walking on a tightrope. And when she looked at me, when our eyes met, there was something cold and calculating in her gaze. I couldn't ignore it anymore. My suspicions were rising. Something was wrong. When the silence stretched on and I could no longer stand the tension, I finally asked, "Emma, what's going on? Why are you avoiding the topic of the business? We need to talk about Hanson Tech. The future of the company is important, and I thought you'd want to be involved in those discussions." Emma didn't respond right away. Instead, she fidgeted with her fork, her gaze shifting away from mine. Finally, she looked up, her face a mask of indifference. "It's not the right time, Dad. We don't need to talk about business tonight. You've been working so hard. You deserve a break." Her words were hollow, like a rehearsed line she'd been repeating to herself. But it wasn't just the words, it was the way she said them, the way she avoided my gaze. I could tell she was hiding something, and that feeling in my gut told me this was no longer just about the company. I studied her closely, noting the way her fingers trembled slightly as she passed me another dish. The mask she wore was cracking, but I couldn't figure out why. What had changed? Why was she acting like this? The evening dragged on in silence. I tried again, but this time, I pushed harder. Emma, I need you to be honest with me. What's really going on? Why are you doing this? She didn't flinch, but I could see the tension in her jaw. She kept her face blank, her lips pressed together in a tight line, but I saw the slight twitch in her eyebrow. She wasn't telling me everything. She responded, but her words were so carefully constructed, so controlled, that I felt the distance between us growing wider. I just don't want you to worry, Dad. Everything will be fine. But it wasn't fine. I could see the cracks, the way she tried to hide the truth from me. It wasn't about the business anymore. It was something deeper, something I wasn't ready to face. I watched her as she moved around the kitchen, her movements smooth but mechanical, and I felt a wave of doubt rush over me. This wasn't the daughter I knew. This was someone else, someone I didn't recognize. I finished my meal. But my appetite was gone. I stood up to leave, feeling her eyes on me. As I reached the door, I stopped for a moment, but I didn't look back. I couldn't. She was ready to do something drastic. I could feel it in my bones. Emma was no longer the person I thought she was. And now, I had to face the reality that I might have lost her. Michael sat across from me, his face serious, focused. We were in his office, lit by the dim light that seemed to heighten the tension. I never thought I'd find myself in this position, forced to defend myself against my own daughter. But this was the reality now, and I had to act. She's using personal moments from your life against you, Michael said, continuing to go through the documents he handed me. I listened carefully, understanding that this was no longer just about the company. This was an attack on my personal reputation, on everything I had built over the years. Emma could easily paint you as someone who's lost control. You think this is just a legal game, but she's destroying everything you've worked for. Michael paused for a moment, letting the gravity of the situation sink in. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. With every word he said, I understood that everything I had considered solid and unshakable was now hanging by a thread. You have to fight, John, Michael said, his voice firm as stone. You can't give up. Everything you've built is at stake. I nodded, but deep inside, doubts were beginning to creep in. I knew I had to fight. I couldn't let her tear everything down. But the more I thought about it, the more I felt the weight of uncertainty. Why had she decided to do this? Why had she turned against me? I had been sure she was ready to take over the company, but maybe she wasn't. Or maybe I wasn't ready to let go. I didn't know. But one thing I knew for sure, if I gave up now, everything I had worked for would be gone. I couldn't let that happen. That evening I returned home. The house was empty. Only the sound of rain tapping on the window filled the silence. I sank into the chair by the window, staring out at the rain, thinking about what had happened, about what was still to come. When I built Hanson Tech, I never thought it would come to something like this. I thought I'd simply pass it on to her, sure that she was ready. But now I was beginning to realize that I had been too absorbed in my work, too consumed by it to see what was happening with her. I had put the company first, not her. I remembered the moments when I canceled family meetings, when I wasn't home because I had to deal with another important business matter. I remembered canceling our conversations because I had to meet with investors. I always thought work was the most important thing. But now, as I thought back, I realized I had lost her. Emma wasn't just a business partner. She was my daughter. And maybe she became this way because she always felt like she was second to the company. I missed that. And now, it was costing me not just her trust, but everything I had built. I returned to my office, preparing for what lay ahead. The strategy was clear, but I knew that this wouldn't be easy. Michael and his team had prepared all the necessary evidence for our defense. We'd crafted a plan that should turn the tide in our favor. But the more I thought about it, the more the internal conflict grew. I was resolute in fighting for the company, for its future. But what about Emma? What about what was happening between us? This wasn't just a legal battle, It was a battle for my future and my daughter's. I didn't know if I could win this conflict, but I knew I couldn't lose. We discussed the details of the strategy, outlining every step I needed to take. I was ready. But what would happen to Emma? I knew she was preparing for this too. And I couldn't figure out what I would feel once it was all over, no matter how it turned out. Inside, doubt was growing. But I knew one thing: I couldn't give up. The court session began in the grand, imposing courtroom. The judge, a middle-aged man with a stern demeanor, banged his gavel and called the proceedings to order. I felt my heart race in my chest as I sat at the defendant's table, facing Emma across the courtroom. I couldn't believe it had come to this, that my own daughter was trying to take everything I had built. The silence in the room was deafening, and I could feel the weight of every pair of eyes on us, especially on me. Michael stood up first, his presence commanding attention. He was prepared, and his calm demeanor gave me some semblance of confidence. He began by presenting the documents that outlined my decisions as the CEO of Hansen Tech. He went over the key moments of my leadership, showing how I had steered the company through difficult times. But I knew Emma's legal team was preparing to tear this apart. Then, Emma stood, walking confidently to the podium, and I felt a sense of unease flood over me. Her posture was perfect, her expression controlled, but I could see the determination behind her eyes. She was ready to fight, and she was going to use everything in her power to win. Mr. Henderson's decisions are no longer based on rational thinking. They are based on his emotional responses, Emma said, her voice echoing in the silent room. He has become unstable, unpredictable. His behavior is harming the company. We cannot trust him to lead this business any longer. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My mind raced. How had it come to this? My own daughter, standing in front of everyone, attacking me, undermining everything I had worked for. I clenched my fists under the table. It was hard to believe. But I knew she would do whatever it took to win, no matter the cost. And in that moment, I realized just how far she had gone to manipulate the truth, to paint me as someone incapable of managing the company. Michael didn't hesitate. He stood up and responded immediately, his tone strong and unwavering. Your Honor, I must emphasize that these claims are nothing but a diversion. My client has always acted in the best interest of Hansen Tech. The accusations are based on emotion, not facts. He paused, letting the gravity of his words settle. But let me show you something important. Michael presented a new set of evidence, bank statements and financial records showing several unauthorized transactions. He outlined the financial manipulations that Emma had made. She had funneled company money into personal accounts, using company resources for her own gain. This was not just a matter of mismanagement, it was theft. Your Honor, these transfers showed deliberate actions to divert funds, actions that were hidden from the board and shareholders. Michael continued, his voice steady. This is not the work of someone looking out for the company's future. I could see the shock in the eyes of the people in the courtroom. Emma's face, usually so composed, was now showing signs of strain. I saw a flicker of panic in her eyes, but she quickly masked it, trying to maintain control. I could feel the room shift. The balance was tipping in our favor. Michael didn't stop there. He displayed more evidence, emails, text messages, and other records of Emma's communications, each one showing the same pattern of deceit. As the documents were laid out in front of the judge, it became clear that her actions had crossed a line. Emma's attempts to paint me as a liability to the company were now exposed for what they truly were, a desperate attempt to seize control. Emma, you tried to paint me as someone who couldn't handle leadership, I said, standing up slowly. The courtroom fell silent as I addressed her directly. But look at these numbers. These aren't mistakes. These are deliberate actions to enrich yourself at the expense of Hansen Tech. Her expression faltered for just a moment, and I could see her preparing to respond, but the damage was done. The evidence spoke for itself. She had used her position in the company to benefit personally. And now she was trying to destroy me to get what she wanted. There was no turning back. The judge took his time, listening carefully to both sides, his face unreadable. But I knew deep down that the tide had turned. I was confident now that we had won. The truth had come out. Emma's manipulations were exposed, and there was no way she could hide behind her lies any longer. When the judge finally spoke, his voice was calm and authoritative. After reviewing all the evidence, I find the accusations against Mr. Henderson to be without merit. This case is dismissed. I sat back in my chair, my body finally releasing the tension it had been holding. Michael gave me a slight nod, but I felt no sense of triumph. The victory felt hollow. I had won, but at what cost? Thank you, John, Michael said quietly, offering his hand. I took it, but the weight of the situation still hung over me. I had won the case, but I had lost my daughter. She was no longer the person I knew. She was someone else, someone I couldn't reach. The courtroom had cleared out, and I stood there, alone, thinking about everything I had just lost. The rain had stopped, and the sun was slowly setting, casting a golden light over the city as I sat across from Emma in a small, quiet cafe. It had been weeks since the court battle ended, but the tension between us hadn't eased. This meeting felt different from the others, though. It wasn't about the company, it wasn't about business. It was about us, our relationship, our family. Emma looked at me across the table, her gaze still guarded, but I could see the hurt in her eyes. I've been thinking a lot, Dad, Emma began, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. I didn't get a chance to tell you how I felt, all these years. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her words. I had been so focused on my company, on the success of Hansen Tech, that I hadn't realized how much I had overlooked. My eyes searched hers, but I couldn't find the right words. What could I say? How could I explain the years I'd spent consumed by work, blind to the hurt I was causing? You've always been there for the company, but you've never been there for me, she said, her voice cracking. I needed you to see me, to hear me. I wanted to make you proud, but I felt invisible. My chest tightened. I hadn't realized how much I had failed her, how much I had put my work before her, before us. She was right. I hadn't been there when she needed me most. I had been so caught up in making Hansen Tech a success, in fighting for the future of the company, that I hadn't given her the attention, the love, the validation that she deserved. I'm sorry, Emma, I said, my voice full of regret. I didn't see it. I was so focused on the company, and I failed you. I wasn't there, and you needed me. I'm sorry for all those years. Emma didn't say anything at first. She just stared at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of pain and something softer. Slowly she nodded. It's okay, Dad. I just wanted you to know how I felt. You weren't the only one who was hurting. We were both hurting in different ways. We sat there in silence for a few moments, the weight of everything finally sinking in. I could feel the shift between us, the understanding that, despite everything, we were still here, still family. And maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward. Later that evening, we sat down together at my house, the living room bathed in the soft glow of the lights. There was a quiet peace between us now, something that hadn't been there before. Emma and I talked for hours, discussing our next steps, both for the company and for our relationship. I think it's time we work together, Emma, I said, after a long pause. I want to offer you the role of co-CEO. I don't want to fight you anymore, I want to build something together. You're my daughter, and you have so much to offer. I can't do this alone anymore. She looked at me, a mixture of surprise and relief in her eyes. I could see that she had been waiting for this moment, but I had been blind to it for so long. I agree, she said, her voice steady now. We both have something to give, Dad. Let's work together and make Hansen Tech better, for both of us. We shook hands then, the deal made. But it wasn't just about business. It was about rebuilding our trust, our family. We were going to start over, and this time, we would do it right. The following evening, our family gathered around the dinner table. There was a sense of calm, of something new being born from the past. The tension that had once filled this room was gone, replaced by a quiet hope for the future. Emma and I signed the agreement to become co-CEOs of Hansen Tech, our signatures a symbol of the fresh start we were creating together. In the corner of the room, my granddaughter Lily was sitting at a small table, her crayons scattered around her. She looked up and smiled at us. "Grandpa, Mom, I made a picture of us. You're both working together in the office. You look happy." We all looked at the picture, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a genuine smile spread across my face. Lily's picture was simple, just the three of us sitting at a desk together, but it was everything I had wanted for so long. It was a picture of us, as a family, working together, supporting each other. Emma stood up and came over to me. She put her arms around me, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a sense of peace. We were together, and we were going to rebuild what had been broken. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered. "I'm glad we're doing this together." I held her tightly, knowing that this was just the beginning. A new chapter for us, for the company, for our family. It wasn't going to be easy, but for the first time in a long time, I believed that we could make it work.